Governor Gordon, welcome to this meeting of the Wyoming Tribune Eagle Editorial Board, as well as this episode of our weekly podcast, The Perch. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
It's nice to be here. Always enjoy this.
Thank you. For those in our listening audience, I'm Brian Martin, the Tribune Eagle's managing editor, and I'm here today with several members of our 8-person editorial board, which meets nearly every week to discuss topics that the WTE should weigh in on from an opinion perspective. And it helps us shape our opinions and try to reach consensus on what will be our official position on that particular topic or topics. We're here on Monday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day together.
Hello, and welcome back to The Perch from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your local government reporter here. This week on The Perch, we're sharing a conversation that the Wyoming Tribune Eagle's managing editor, Brian Martin, had with Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon. The two spoke at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle's editorial board meeting this week, and it was around a week and a half after the Wyoming legislative session concluded this year. That's who you heard at the start of the show. Brian and Governor Gordon discussed issues like DOGE, federal employee cuts, the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, property tax relief, and the governor's plans for the future once his current term is up in January 2027. You're about to hear excerpts from their interview, and stick around after to hear a roundup of some upcoming local events and a recap of the top local news stories from over the past week. The full hour-long interview with Governor Gordon will be uploaded as a separate special podcast episode this week if you'd like to hear them discuss issues not featured in this preview, things like affordable housing, a controversial school vouchers bill, and efforts to transfer federal control of land to the state. But first, here's that preview of their interview.
So one of the things this editorial board said before the session began was that lawmakers should wait and see whether property tax relief that was passed last year was enough to help those Wyomingites who most needed it. Mm-hmm. Instead, they passed an across-the-board 25% cut on residential property valued up to $1 million. You signed that bill, Senate File 69. Why did you do that, and what do you say to the local fire districts, other special districts, and towns that don't have reserves to dip into, that are going to lose that revenue?
Thank you for pointing that out in your editorial, because they do take effect this year, and I think they will have a significant impact on local taxes. Last year, you'll remember, I did veto a very similar bill to the one that came this year, but the main thing there is there was this notion of a backfill, that we would take money from our mineral companies and we would fill in behind that. There's several reasons I didn't like that approach. Number one, if you're going to give a tax break, it should be to the people who pay those taxes, and it feels a little bit more like what you'd expect out of a communist country, to take from the people who can and give to the people who need, which is sort of what I was objecting to there. If you pay taxes, then that's where you should be receiving them. I think receiving the relief. I think that the second piece to that was, as a Republican, it's always been my belief that government's best when it governs least and when it's closest to the people. Putting more dependency on the state being able to give you the money you need to be able to support those services, a big issue. And it's one that Wyoming wrestles with regard to the federal government as well. We have a tremendous amount of dependence on what the federal government sends our way. So I didn't want to encourage that same kind of trickle-down problem there.
So last year, you vetoed part of a school vouchers bill, saying it was unconstitutional. Yet this year, you signed it, and you praised it as a, quote, remarkable achievement for Wyoming, unquote. What changed between your opposition last year and your support of it this year?
Well, I think when we passed it last year, as you know, we had a means test in it for pre-K. Did not really feel like poking the bear because there were some constitutional questions. I think some of those questions have been answered for me. Some of those questions may yet be tested. But one reason why I think it is a remarkable achievement is really school choice is a very important aspect of, I think, any educational system. Certainly a national conversation.
What's your take on the whole DOGE approach to government downsizing? Do you agree with our congressional delegation, including Representative Hageman, who this week at one of her town halls this past weekend said that she supports Elon Musk and what's being done with downsizing? Do you support with that, and do you have any concerns about Congress giving up too much authority to the executive branch at this point?
Brian, I'm a stickler for the Constitution, and I believe that we have three branches that are divided for a reason. It was interesting to me that President Trump remembered George Washington's decision to go home instead of become king. So, take that as you will. But I do think that we have a Congress that's at loggerheads and not able to be the check and the balance that they need to be going forward. Look, there's a lot of room, I think, in what the federal government does to be able to reduce expense, reduce bureaucratic overreach, a number of those things that are important. At the end of that tale, there are people's lives. There are people whose health insurance is associated, and so on and so forth. And despite the fact that it's lovely to beat up on bureaucrats as being, mindless automatons that are trying to take away all your rights, they're still people. And a lot of times they're people that care a lot and are embedded in communities. And so I think it will be problematic. I'm not sure anybody would ever say Elon Musk is an artist, and it perhaps could have been done more artfully, but I still think it's valuable. So I have faith in America that Congress from time to time, ebbs and flows with its consistency. Al Simpson, dear friend, was there at a time when I really think Congress was remarkable in what it was able to do. I think there have been presidents who haven't been very strong and others that have been remarkable. I think that's the nature and the dynamism that makes America what it is.
That's good. The Wyoming Freedom Caucus, now in control of the House of Representatives, calls itself the conscience of the Republican Party in the state, and you're the top elected member of that party. Do you agree with that statement? If not, where do you think most Wyoming Republicans land on that political spectrum?
Well, I've never been so arrogant to think that I know what every Republican in Wyoming thinks. I believe that Wyoming people are independent. We have a libertarian streak to us that I think is very pronounced. I've always felt that Wyoming is a conservative state and a practical state. The fact that we went through a legislative session spending an inordinate amount of time talking about issues that were in the national scope of things, I think marks a bit of a departure from the Republican sort of upbringing I had. As I say, I think there will be time. It's unclear to me how well the Freedom Caucus distinguished themselves this session. I think time will tell if people think that was a good idea or not. But as I say, coming back to the issues that were really important to Wyoming, Veterans Affairs, we didn't really do much about. We did talk a lot about property tax, but only in terms of how we cut them. We didn't do anything about OB care. We didn't really take care of some of the more pressing issues that I think Wyoming Republicans, given the chance to think about, really focus on. The things locally, close to home. I care a lot about, what my town, what my county is doing, and I think we took away some of that. So it'll be unclear. So to answer your question directly, I would hope nobody would say, I am the conscience of the Republican Party, because every Wyoming citizen has their own mind, and they'll follow whatever they think is the right course of action.
So, Governor, we just came past the 5th anniversary of the COVID shutdown, lockdowns. We had a conversation in here recently about avian influenza, bird flu, and obviously that's not human-to-human transmission yet. We hope it doesn't ever get there. But if it's not bird flu, it could be something else. How do you feel about the response that you were involved in 5 years ago? And if another pandemic came along today, would you handle things differently? Are we ready for it? Do you have any concerns?
I think we always end up trying to fight the battle we just went through. So to a degree of saying, well, now we know all the things we should do, that's sort of a fool's errand from my standpoint. When we went into it, nobody really knew what to make of things. One of the big challenges, I think, in any national effort is that Wyoming is an outlier. We aren't there for a healthcare system the way other states are. Our schools certainly different than other schools. The way we measured progress a little bit different than many other schools, and so given the information we had at the time, there were some things I would have done differently. Absolutely, I think. To your question about are we prepared, would we do better next time, I think hopefully we have better supplies, we have better, personal protection. We have some of the protocols in place to be able to respond more quickly. Mm-hmm. I think we should watch out for that because, we had 9/11 and then we didn't do anything until COVID, and so a lot of the supplies were, rotten or broken. Expired. So I think we can do a better job of maintaining that. In the end, so much of it was what felt right here in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. When I got the call from Mark Meadows, who was chief of staff for President Trump at the time, saying you've got to issue a stay-at-home order. Christy Nome, Asa Hutchins, Ricketts. I think there were 5 of us that said we're not doing it. And I think that was the right decision because ultimately, it proved to be a better decision. Mm-hmm. So.
One of the most controversial was shutting down the rodeos in the state, including Cheyenne Frontier Days. Would you do that again if the situation were the same?
So producing a rodeo these days is an incredibly expensive enterprise. And pieces of that really require ticket sales. And if your star isn't going to come, you lose all that revenue. And I think for the rodeos, the big sort of marquee rodeos that were there, if there was a thing I would say I felt really good about, it is in true Wyoming fashion, the organizers of those rodeos came together and we said, this is existential for us. If we lose too much money, we'll never be able to put this rodeo on again. And so we need to come together as an entity. And I said, you know what? I grew up in this state. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to step forward and I'll do this. They all stood behind me. You remember that press conference? Mm-hmm. It was the hardest thing, still is hard to think about, hardest thing I've ever done in many ways. And yet that same group said, we want to make sure that we have a state fair and every one of our county rodeos, county fairs, has an opportunity to come off. We did that. And I remember the judge for the hog show was crying in the middle of the arena for the hog show because he said, he's from Oklahoma, he said, this is what we should be doing. We did it. So.
Great. Well, Governor, we want to honor your time, and I know we're coming up on the end of our hour together, but before we let you go, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about your political future. We've heard through the grapevine that Wyoming's First Lady, your wife Jenny, isn't too excited about the prospect of living in our nation's capital. So if that's true, it seems unlikely that you'd be seeking to swap places with Representative Hageman, who has said at some point she'd like to have your job. And since Wyoming has this strange term limit rule that governors are required to take 4 years off before they can have a third term, you'd have to challenge that term limit rule in the courts in order to run for a third consecutive term. Yeah. So do you plan to do that?
Brian, I haven't come up with that, in my mind. It's certainly in the back burner. Mm-hmm. Jenny's not we love our ranch. We love our kids, and political life is sometimes tough on both of those things. I love this state tremendously. I ran against Cynthia Lummis back in the day when we were both running for Congress because I thought I could make a difference, and I think Cynthia did a phenomenal job there. She beat me. I've never looked back at that. And as I see Congress now, it worries me. I had this notion somehow back in 2008 that somebody who actually was interested in finding solutions, who was really motivated to try to do the best thing that they knew how, listen to the people, find out from the constituents, work across the aisle, all those things could make a difference. That doesn't seem as possible today. So from the point of view of the House, no, not particularly interested. John Barrasso is a very good friend, as is Cynthia. Cynthia chooses to run for Senate. Sounds like she is. She has my full support. I think they've done a phenomenal job. And I got to tell you, I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country right now is too many people are thinking of politics as a career instead of a service. And one reason why I still have the ranch and we still are dedicated to it and still work on it is because I think once you've done your service, I don't know if this is like George Washington, but you go back and do the things that you like to do. Mm-hmm. So whether that's going to happen, I don't know.
Okay. You've still got a little time left in the office.
I do.
We'll see. See how that goes.
Well, and really, quite frankly, Brian, from that standpoint, there's so much we need to do. And already there are, probably 3 people on the state loan and investment board trying to run for governor. You've got Harriet releasing a poll early. You've got Brent Bien talking about it, and yet, we have the things we've talked about here: significant issues, healthcare, mental health. How do we fund our schools? What are we doing with property taxes? How's that going to support local governments? These are challenges we should all be engaged in, not just trying to figure out who gets to be elected next.
Right. Well, it seems like we roll from one election cycle right into the next one. So
sadly so, yeah.
Unfortunately so. Well, Governor Gordon, again, we sincerely appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for giving us part of your busy schedule and coming over and visiting. We wish you continued success and hope that you'll not be a stranger and come back and visit us again.
Well, thanks, Brian. Thank you all. That's been great. So,
thanks for being here.
Thanks.
That was the Wyoming Tribune Eagle's managing editor, Brian Martin, in conversation with Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon. You can listen to the full hour-long interview wherever you are currently listening to The Perch. It was also published today. But now I'm here with Taylor Staples, our arts and entertainment reporter, to bring us a roundup of some upcoming local events in the area this week.
Thank you, Noah. So today, the Cheyenne Little Theater Players are putting on their production of Steel Magnolias at 7:30 p.m., and East High School is performing their second night of Rock of Ages at 7 p.m. Then, on Saturday, March 22nd, the Laramie County Community College has their Let's Get Growing event with the Laramie County Gardeners at 1 p.m. Also, VFW Post 1881 has their annual chili cook-off at 1 p.m., and East High School is performing Rock of Ages for the final day, also at 1 p.m. Then, the Event Center at Archer is hosting Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling from 5 to 9 p.m. The Lincoln will be holding an ambient art night at 7 p.m., and CLTP is performing Steel Magnolias again at 7:30 p.m. On Sunday, March 23rd, Cats and Coffee Connections is hosting a DIY wood sign workshop from 1 to 3 p.m. CLTP is performing Steel Magnolias again at 2 p.m. And the library is hosting an Introduction to Dungeons & Dragons game from 2 to 4 p.m. Then on Monday, March 24th, the library has a matinee movie for mindful aging for adults where they'll view The Nun's Story from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. On Tuesday, March 25th, the library will have a Tuesday night book club discussing C.J. Box's book Blue Heaven at 6 p.m., and the Rail Spur will host a Tacos, Nonprofits, and Tequilas fundraiser from 6 to 9 p.m. Also, the Cheyenne Civic Center will kick off night 1 of their Shen Yun Ballet show at 7 p.m., and Shaky Graves will perform at the Lincoln at 8 p.m. Then on Wednesday, March 26th, people can learn the basics of oil painting at the Cheyenne Creativity Center at 5:30 p.m., And Shenyun will perform again at the Civic Center at 7 p.m. And finally, on Thursday, March 27th, the library will hold an adult craft night with upcycled floral jars from 3 to 7 p.m. And the Lincoln Way Event Hall will host Thankful Thursdays once again starting at 4 p.m. This week, the sponsor is the Cheyenne Shrine Club. And finally, South High School will kick off their production of School of Rock tonight at 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you for that, Taylor. Appreciate it. Before we close out today's episode, here's a quick recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. Former U.S. Senator Alan Simpson, a Republican from Wyoming, died last Friday morning in Cody. He was 93 years old. Simpson was famous for his quick wit and ability to work across the aisle in Congress. In his first ever public veto of a bill, Governor Mark Gordon shot down Senate File 196 on Tuesday afternoon. The legislation would have amended the Second Amendment Protection Act, or SAPA, which Gordon signed into law 3 years ago. Gordon likened the bill to efforts in other states to defund the police, saying that he would prefer to back the blue. High winds across Laramie County and into northern Colorado have kept local firefighters busy, putting out a fire at the City of Cheyenne compost facility on Sunday and attending to 3 local grass fires Monday morning. Fires aren't just kicking up in Laramie County either. To the south, evacuations were ordered due to a fire in Larimer County, Colorado. Just a day after, on Tuesday, a grass fire decimated 2 buildings in the 3100 block of Terry Road. That's all for this week's episode of The Perch. Hope you enjoyed, and be sure to follow up on any of those stories online or in print if you'd like to learn more, and check out the full interview with Governor Gordon if you'd like to hear it wherever you are currently listening to The Perch. And be sure to tune in next Friday to hear a conversation that Taylor Staples had with the music director and conductor of the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra, William Intriligator, on how he approaches his work and his art.